We have no qualms about investing in our education. But why is it that when we are entrepreneurs or we're trying to invest in ourselves in a non-traditional way, whether that's coaching or mentorship or books, whatever it is that's going to help us and elevate us to the next level, why do we look at that and say, oh my gosh, that's too expensive, I can't do it? And it's like a $30 book or a $100 book or a mentor that you're paying like $2,000 for. Why? You just spent 10 grand on a degree that you probably won't even use. So that was one thing that I really had to push back on myself and realize, okay, if I'm going to make it in this industry, if I'm going to make it as an entrepreneur, I have to invest in myself.
Welcome to The Path to Wealth, the show about well-being, fulfillment, and financial freedom. And I'm your host, Hannes Henty. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to The Path to Wealth. Today we have Nicole Gauthier from Wicked Holdings. She's invested in single-family units as well as multifamily units. She's owning over 200 different apartments, and we're diving in what it took her in terms of mindset as well as the learning journey to get here. So welcome to The Path to Wealth, Nicole. We're glad to have you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm glad to be here.
So first off, I would like to know, where does the name Wicked Holding come from? What made you name your company Wicked?
Yeah, no, I get that question a lot, actually. So it's funny. So being from up
That's
north,
good branding, no?
Yeah, it is. The name definitely sticks.
Yeah.
But being from Canada, we say like wicked quite often, and wicked means like awesome, really cool. And so Not only did I want to embody that, but I wanted to kind of surround myself. And it's kind of like a little icebreaker to meet other awesome and really cool people too. So that's where it came from.
Yeah, you kind of immediately set the stage for we're slightly different here. So I would like to get a little bit of a feel of where did your journey in real estate begin, and the original ideas that you had around maybe money mindset and what it took to get where you are today. So maybe you can give us a little bit an idea about your background and where you came from and where you're taking it from here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually had an oil and gas background. I, grew up kind of in that traditional thinking of, you get a great education, you go to school and then you get a great job and you work until you're like 65 years old and whatnot. And then you can live your life. And so that's kind of where I kind of got my start, was working as an accountant for a large oil and gas company. And, but I always felt like while I was working that I was kind of like pigeonholed into this box of like what an accountant should be or what they should look like. And I felt like entrepreneurship was like always calling me. My personality is just a little bit more out there, and I like to, connect with other people and talk and just have fun. And your typical accountant isn't really like that. So
yeah, it doesn't sound a whole lot like an accountant.
Yeah, no, especially in oil and gas, it's different for sure. But nonetheless, my journey just kind of brought me to real estate investing. Honestly, when I had first reached out and was looking for single families to start, kind of investing in, I actually came across a house that was like, it was very badly managed. There was a single mom in there with 3 kids, and just the house was like, it looked like it was basically kind of falling apart in a sense.
Yeah.
And it really broke my heart to see that there's people that are living like that, not only just in the States, but just around the world. And I felt like, okay.
Where was that located?
It was in Houston, Texas. Okay. Yeah. And they're paying market rent for a home that probably shouldn't have been that expensive. But nonetheless, I just kind of set out on a mission after that to really make a difference and say, okay, well, as a real estate investor, you have a fiduciary duty to be able to take care of your tenants and make sure that they're living in good living conditions. Kind of combined all of my 4 passions, and that landed me into real estate investing.
That's nice. So, what are those passions? How did you identify them? Because one of the things I think people are struggling with is identifying their passions. Was that something that came natural to you? Is it something that was like a trial and error? Something that, how did you go about identifying those for yourself?
Yeah. So during COVID, actually, I had a lot of time to sit and reflect and just kind of think back on like what it was that I wanted to do. And I think that the fact that, I've got young kids, they're 6 and 3, I knew that when I was in corporate America, I did not have the work-life balance that I would like to have had, being present for my kids. So I knew right away, I just completely disregarded corporate America and going back there. Now I know, of course, there's companies that do provide that work-life balance, but I had yet to find that upon moving to the States. And so I'd say that I've always had a passion for like looking at homes. Like that was just something that was fun for me.
You just like houses?
Yeah, I just like houses. I don't know why. It's like I just be on Zillow for no reason, just like looking to see like what's out there and like liking, hearting all the houses. And my poor husband's like, "Why are you looking at houses again?" And I'm like,
he's like, "You want to buy another house?"
Yeah, I'm like, it's just so fun. So I was like always doing that. And then I have always had a passion for interior design. I love like being creative and just thinking outside the box. I have a finance degree, so crunching numbers was definitely my jam, which, in real estate, underwriting, all of the analyzing, that's super fun. And the only piece that was missing was me being able to help someone else, help other people. And when I put all three of those passions then in together with being able to help other people, that's how I narrowed down real estate investing specifically versus becoming like, a realtor or a broker or something like that. So
yeah, I think those kind of soul searching processes, they're not as straightforward as they might seem in some books, do X, Y, Z, and then,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
We have to kind of weave it together.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think with COVID too, that was a time, especially, when Texas was like closed down for 2 weeks, it was a long time for us to just sit around and twiddle our fingers and be like, whoa, what do we do next? So yeah.
Which is actually pretty short compared to the rest of the world. I mean, we're recording, we're 2 years into this. China is still in kind of a lockdown mode. Texas has been open for 2 years almost. They went into a very brief lockdown. So
yeah,
let's see what comes out of China. Maybe they're contemplating a lot deeper than we are.
Could be. Maybe they know something we don't.
When it comes to your passion to helping people, I know you're very passionate about like single moms because you want them to have proper living conditions. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on that because it's something that's close to your heart.
Yeah, I think with the single moms thing, let me back up a little bit. I think for me, I've always been a very empathetic person. I remember being a kid and like walking down the street or being somewhere and seeing homeless people and being really upset that I like could only give them money. And I was like, I remember I like crying to like my mom and stuff. Like, I don't feel like that's enough. And of course, something is better than nothing, but I think that empathetic side for me is like just always been there, and it's kind of traveled. It's gotten more deeper for me as I've become a mom and realized like I'm not a single mom, but my husband is in oil and gas and he travels a lot for work. And so there's periods of time where I am by myself with the kids and doing everything with, getting them to school and their activities and helping my daughter and stuff with like her little homework projects and whatnot. But just doing everything. And that can be really exhausting. So if you couple that with the fact that now you're living in a home that is not properly suited for your family, like I can't imagine living that way. And I think that my point in helping single moms really was set in motion after I viewed that first house and there was a single mom in there. And I was just like, okay, no. So it took me about a month to basically found my company after viewing that and touring that. And I set out on a mission to be able to help single moms. Also specifically too, because typically moms are the ones that give up their careers when they have kids. I was in that same position, becoming a stay-at-home mom. And so I get what that can do to someone. And if you don't have that
Yeah.
choice, or you're in, an adverse situation and there's nowhere for you to go, that it's really important to be able to provide the resources for people that are in those sorts of situations. So that's really where that came from.
What would you maybe encourage a mom in that situation to do? Because you said that house that you looked at was at market pricing, but maybe sometimes they're not aware that, they could live in a maybe better place for the same money. I find that sometimes the tenants in those, they lack a little bit of perspective when it comes to what they could do or where they could take it. So can we reach out to them and kind of help them along their way? What do you think is a good entrance point for people that actually want to help there?
Yeah, I've talked to a couple of different nonprofits, like different organizations that are here that are local in Houston. And I've tried to, I've reached out to them. One of them, I was helping the director, like specifically with some real estate stuff, but also kind of the challenge of having moms and at-risk youth being in these sorts of like temporary living facilities. And so I think that one of the ways that we can really reach out and try to make a difference is by partnering with charitable organizations or nonprofits that are suitable for the mission that you're on, so that you can really get kind of a deeper dive into the actual problems that exist, and then reaching out and saying, okay, how exactly can I be of assistance, or how can I help? And there's educational platforms and financial literacy resources that you can create as well. And so that's really why I do like a lot of education on, on my social media channels and stuff too, because it starts also with financial literacy as well.
Would you say that those moms end up there because there might be a lack of education? And I'm just looking back at my own education, and I saw that the people that I went to elementary school with that ended up having the lowest education out of all my other students in my class, they actually tended to have more children and earlier. So that I found there was like a direct link just in my circle of people that tend to have children earlier and maybe more children. So
yeah, I mean, I've seen that, but I also think too that there's a different piece of it that we don't always see. And I will say, because I know moms that are in the situation that, their husbands don't allow them to work, and they've come from another country and they don't have driver's licenses, they don't have jobs. And so they've purposely been put into these positions of being dependent on their husband, because I mean, they have nowhere else to go or any other means of being able to support themselves. So in these sorts of situations, they can be physically or verbally abused, and they don't know anything else, or they have nowhere to go because they've been essentially kind of targeted into staying at the kind of, below the totem pole, I guess you could say. So there are situations where, it is due to like a lack or lower education, but there's also circumstances too that are outside of one's control. And I think that's when we really have to do a deeper dive and realize, okay, there's more to the story than this. So that's what I've found so far.
So as multifamily landlords, we're also catering to like slightly distressed assets, sometimes like C-class properties or maybe a B-class. As a landlord, where do you think we can like tie in there and, not only look at the bottom line, but kind of identify those tenants as coming from a place where they actually need a helping hand, rather than being kicked out? Because I think there's generally a lot of perception that landlords might be bad. And I mean, I'm in the New York market and everybody here feels like their landlord is just crushing them on rent. But I know, given that we're all like landlords and a lot of the people in the multifamily space, they're good at heart, while they're also looking out for the investors. So how do you think we can make that distinction? And if we have to evict somebody, for example, because we are ultimately reporting to our investors, how can we then connect them to help? Is it that we connect them with a charity organization that helps them get to a better place next, despite maybe not being able to live in our apartments?
Yeah, so I think that it starts with, for one, of course, we have the just as landlords on our single family units or our personal units, we have the fiduciary duty to make sure that these are in like good livable conditions. I think
Yeah.
that when we're going in, we're purchasing like C class assets or like lower B class assets. That we're going in and we're making sure that the value that is added is also for the tenant base as well, that the conditions are being improved so that their living conditions are not only better, but the surrounding community is as a whole, like making sure
Yeah.
that, of course, you sometimes see, cars on blocks or cars that are like in the parking lots that aren't working, or just kind of some nefarious individuals that can be on grounds and stuff sometimes. So there's certain things that I feel like definitely need to be cleaned up,
Yeah.
and that value added for the tenants. But then I also think that for those that are having struggles with like paying their rent, it's important to understand why. And then like I think we can do that through property management and making sure that we've got good people that are empathetic on our property management teams, who aren't just going to go in and be like, oh, you're like 10 days late on, your rent, and but
Yeah.
however trending, they've paid every time for the last, let's say they're long-term tenants and they've been there for like a few years or 5 years, because
Yeah.
you do see that sometimes too.
Yeah.
But diving deeper into the story and hiring people on your team that are really going to want to make a difference too.
But I guess there's also an incentive structure. Like if our property management company might have somebody in those units for 5 years, they might see an opportunity to take it up to market.
Yeah, and it could be too
So
where they've been in there for 5 years and they've been okay with the increased the rental rates that have gone up on them. They could have
yeah.
just been long-term tenants, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, of course, when there's properties that are under market like that, then typically at the lease up time is when we go in and we say, okay, well, would you like to renew your lease at this new rate, or what's the other option? And typically they'll say, yeah, no, that's fine, especially in this market right now, because where else are you going to go, right? and then the amount of money that you're going to pay a moving company to come move your stuff to somewhere else, it's just like, oh my gosh, like everything's crazy right now. I personally wouldn't want to be dealing with that, but yeah, no, we're seeing a lot of different things in the market right now, and there's been a lot of properties that are literally at 99 and 100% occupancy. So
Yeah, right now the properties are less distressed than the tenants because they don't really have a move.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So given that we just touched up on education, who do you would say that was like very influential in your money mindset? Like where did your savviness around that come from? Did you just like always have a tendency for numbers, and because I mean you like accounting, but at the same time you describe yourself as creative. I don't know how that falls into place, but a creative accountant, that sounds scary. I don't want a creative accountant. Maybe.
I said I have a finance degree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did you kind of trend into that direction? Where does your money mindset come from? I know your husband, Justin, is also a lot into mindset. And I wonder where did that come from and who shaped you in that direction?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So looking back on my entrepreneurship journey, I feel like that started when I was a kid. Like, and I say I feel like I know it did. I remember being in kindergarten, and like at the school that I went to, we got these
Selling candy?
Yeah. Oh, did you hear that? Did you hear that somewhere?
No, I'm just guessing because
Oh.
I used to take Cokes from my mom's shop and then sell them for back then like a Deutschmark or then a euro at school, So,
Yeah, that's so funny.
Just what we do, no?
Well, I was hustling candy out of my room as a kid. So I would get like really good grades. I'd get my little gold card at school, and then I would go to the window because they had this little like it was like this window, like if you made like straight A's or whatever, you got this literally a laminated gold card with your name on it and like your picture.
Ooh.
And you got to go up to the window and like pick out what you wanted from like the treat thing or whatever. And it was like basically like a candy shop in a sense.
Yeah.
And I'd always pick like the candies that I knew that my dad really liked because he was like my target customer. And so I essentially was like getting the candy for free, and then I would go home and I'd set it up in my room in this like corner. It's like really nice, like my little handwritten thing as well as I could at that time, of course. And my dad would like come in and be like, oh, like airheads or stickers were like his thing. So yeah, so then I would make some money that way. When I was like 8 or 9, one of my friends and we started a bracelet making thing. So we like made these bracelets and went door to door and did some sales and made some like extra money that way. Like I for sure remember that one person spent like $20 on one bracelet and was like, oh, okay, whatever, just to like support. But again, like I started a babysitting company at 11 and cruise through. And I think that was the shift for me. And actually my parents seeing how much money that I was making in my babysitting and nannying business, they were the ones that I remember my mom took me to an Edward Jones and we opened up a mutual funds account. And that's when I basically started investing. So the extra money that I would make, I would take a little bit of it to spend. And then most of it I would save because I've always been a big saver. And I would take that and invest it. And that's how I ended up paying for my first vehicle and a bunch of other things. But yeah, so I guess
that's really amazing. Like to go straight and be like, okay, you're making some decent money here. We should get this invested. I mean, where did that come from their end? Is it something that they learned? Is it something that was handed to them from their parents?
I think that it was probably something that my mom learned or that my parents learned. I don't know, like, I don't remember if my dad was as much involved in that piece of it, but, like both of my parents, so I guess my grandparents had like good paying jobs. They grew up like pretty, I guess I would say like kind of middle class in Louisiana. And my mom was raised by a single mom. Yeah, I don't know. I guess probably a lot of that stems from them. Because I think back and I'm like, both sets of my grandparents had rental properties and all that fun stuff. I don't know why my parents never did, but but yeah, they did, and it kind of skipped a generation. And now, here I am today trying to create that sort of legacy for my family. So yeah.
Yeah. So how do you feel like you as a mother, from now you have a 6-year-old and
my 3-year-old.
Then how do you a 3-year-old? Yeah, you saw me guessing. It was like I don't remember the second age. But yeah, so you have a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. How do you plan on like passing those lessons on? Because I feel like it can be very playful, and so I wonder how you're doing it, given that you're already wicked. No, just kidding.
Well, you know what? I don't have it in here. Normally it's like on my bookshelf, but it's actually in the laundry room now because I did a lesson with my son on Sunday where he earned his first $1, or Saturday he earned his first $1. But
for an act of kindness, right?
Yes, by showing leadership skills, and being kind and trying to create a win-win for him and his sister. So that's one way that I like to reward the kids. Is we have this bear, it's called Banker Bear, and he's just got a bunch of ones in him, and I try to look for leadership skills around the house. So of course, if my daughter says like, oh, I want to save up to get something, how can I earn some extra money? Then we'll set her to work and we'll say, okay, well, you can do this, this, and this. Normally it's my husband coming up with something completely ridiculous that he's like, oh, you got to bounce on your head and turn around like 10 times and do a couple push-ups and then you'll get $1. And she's like, okay, like that's his way of thinking, but it works. And so there's a way where we can reward for chores and other things that are done, as well as rewarding for leadership skills. But we talk a lot about very age-appropriate things. So she's 6, and we'll talk about needs versus wants. And she knows that we invest our money. So, anytime that Banker Bear comes out, we talk about investing, saving, spending, and charitable giving. We also talk about like what investing means. And when we go to the store, I'm very specific on keeping to a budget. So
Yeah.
last weekend she wanted to get some slime, and I was like, okay, well, here's your budget. It's $6. Now with inflation, I didn't realize that when I got to Target, I was like, there's nothing here for $6. Like, what is this? That's,
Those days are over,
Yeah.
the 99-cent shops are dead.
It is. It's $1.25 now. And then even then
Yeah.
there's stuff in there for $5. But yeah, so like basically my point is, I gave her like a budget, and she was like, how about this? How about this? How about this? And it took a long time for her to find something that was within that budget. And my point to teaching her was, hey, look, like that is life. Like you're going to have to stick within the budget if you want to advance in life. Money doesn't fall from trees. So you got to figure out a way, and you have to do it yourself because no one else is going to do it for you. So there's a lot of life, little random lessons that pop up, I'd say.
But it's nice. I like how parents weave that in. Like my parents, they gave us a budget for clothing for the year. So, and then I had like, I don't know, $100 or something for the year to get dressed. That was actually enough back then for me as a child.
Yeah.
But then I had to wrap my head around that, what that even means. Because before she said that, I had no idea what the shirt prices is. Like,
yeah.
So there's those little lessons that, okay, here's the money. You can buy whatever you want as long as it's within your budget.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And it forces them to kind of like look at the price tags and stuff too. And it was funny because I was giving this lesson to her because everything she was picking out was more than her budget. And I was telling her, well, what would you do? Like, we just came from Costco and mommy had a certain amount of money that, I'd budgeted for groceries. If I went over that, then no one else is there to pay. So it's the same thing for your slime and all these other fun things that you want to get. And another mom overheard, and she's like, I hope you're listening to this, Iris. Like, and the little girl was like, huh? Like, had no clue. But it's funny because these are lessons that we like think of, but I feel like a lot of parents like don't teach their kids that way. They just say right away, we can't afford it, or money doesn't grow from trees. And it's like, no, like you got to dive deeper into it with them.
So, I guess many heard that money doesn't grow on trees, which probably damaged us kind of long term because we like think it's super scarce, while the truth is money is rather abundant, especially after the last printing rage. Mm-hmm. So what are some of the money beliefs that you had to divorce, things that were given to you maybe by your immediate circle or your family, where you're like, I definitely have to dismiss that in order to step into a different level on my money game? Yeah.
So two things for sure pop up right away when you said that. One is investing in myself. I had to, oh man. Okay. So, it's easy for us to go out and buy, and be okay with educating ourselves and paying for the degrees at these universities and colleges, right? We don't even really think about it. It's just like, well, I need this job and I need this education. I need this degree in order to get that job. So I'm just going to pay whatever it is at this school that I really want to go to so I can get it. And oftentimes people get into student debt and whatever else, right? But we have no qualms about investing in our education. But why is it that when we are entrepreneurs or we're trying to invest in ourselves in a non-traditional way, whether that's coaching or mentorship or books or programs, whatever it is that's going to help us and elevate us to the next level, why do we look at that and say, oh my gosh, that's too expensive, I can't do it? And it's like a $30 book or a $100 book or, a mentor that you're paying like $2,000 for. Why? You just spent 10 grand on a degree that you probably won't even use. Like, why do we think that way? So that was one thing that I really had to push back on myself and realize, okay, if I'm going to make it in this industry, if I'm going to make it as an entrepreneur, I have to invest in myself. And my husband would be very consistent in reminding me, just think of it as like your real world tuition, like your real life tuition. I'm like, okay. So when he worded it that way, I was like, okay, I get it. Like, I'm fine with spending this ridiculous amount of money educating myself through mentors and coaching and programs and whatnot. Another thing that I really had to kind of wrap my head around was debt, right? We look at debt as like being all bad. And of course, consumer debt, and there's other different types of debt that aren't good, like credit cards and I guess A car loan's probably not that great of debt either, because it's not doing anything for
Depends.
us.
If you use a car to drive to check out properties, then it might be a good one.
Yeah. Okay. So that works. That definitely works. It's definitely shifting like your thinking and your perspective on things. But that was another thing, was debt. Like the difference between good debt versus bad debt, and understanding
Yeah.
that sometimes you have to leverage debt in order to grow and create a better portfolio for yourself and more income. So it's all
Yeah.
about kind of like shifting things around versus just saying, oh, all debt's bad debt and I just can't do it. Well, then you'd be saving for the rest of your life. Right.
Yeah.
So those are two things that definitely come to mind that were major shifts for me.
I think especially in this environment right now, I mean, I think the February inflation is like 8.5%, what I just read this morning.
Yeah.
So that means the debt we are holding is actually, even the interest
cheap.
rate on our debt it's just getting better for us as we keep proceeding into this. So that I think that's a hard one for people to understand, how inflation kind of impacts their buying power, and how debt is actually beneficial in a scenario like right now. And obviously, if you use the debt to leverage investments, that's how you build wealth. But how did you kind of break through that? What did it take? Did it take mentors, or when did it really seep into you? Being an accountant, you already were very interested in financials, but it sounds like it was much later. Like there are still many people who are very smart around numbers who don't understand that, if you utilize leverage and debt differently, you can actually build legacy wealth for your family, instead of, because you and me know we can never save our way to wealth.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You can't. You have to invest, and you have to learn to pivot and to create different sorts of investment strategies that work best for you. Because of course, we all have different levels of risk tolerance, and we have to understand that within ourselves. For me, I probably have a little bit of lower risk tolerance than maybe someone who's like, come from a family of entrepreneurs and they're used to risk. For me as an accountant, I'm like that's like the most probably conservative job you could ever have in your life. so again, it was like, it was a big shift for me in thinking, okay, like, no, I cannot keep saving just to save, because it's just, it's not, it doesn't work. That's not how the wealthy people get wealthier. That's how you end up losing your money. And I think that shift came, one, for sure, from reading Rich Dad Poor Dad and understanding that my house that I've been thinking about has been like your house is your greatest asset. We're always told that.
Yeah.
And it's not, unless you're actually making money from it or it's paying you.
Unless you have a business in the first floor.
Yeah, exactly. Otherwise, it's a liability because you're paying, like, your money is consistently going out on it. Now, some people look at that differently and say, well, the rate of appreciation on your home could, in essence, make that an asset. But again, there's various different perspectives.
I think if you straight up hold a house unleveraged in a cash position, the only positive thing about that is that sense of security. And if someone needs that to sleep well, then I think it's perfectly fine for them owning it. But otherwise, I would never look at it as like something, like if you have it completely unleveraged, I think even most markets, the appreciation is not that significant unless you happen to buy it in Florida 10 years, 20 years ago. Right now, you have a amazing appreciation on it, even just in the last 24 months.
Yeah. No,
but most houses are kind of spread out, and I wouldn't consider them an asset in that sense.
Yeah. No, it definitely depends on the area, I would say, because I've got some friends that just purchased. They purchased a home like 2 years ago, and they just sold it within the last week, and they made like $200,000 on their money, like within 2 years. So I'd say that's pretty solid. But there's external factors as to why that's happening. It's not a common thing in every single market everywhere. We are seeing this sort of transition in specific spots and for varying reasons. And here it's the school districts in the specific neighborhood that we live in. It's they're 10 out of 10 for public, and people save money that way by not having to be forced to pay private school. So everyone wants to be in this area because of that.
Yeah. So how do we reach people, that maybe don't have access to a 10 out of 10 public school, and there's some disparity. And I saw one of your posts about the Netflix documentary about the wealth gap. It literally blew my mind. I mean, I wasn't aware it's that big. But how do we reach those people? And, how can we kind of give them some guidance on how to maybe become that person in their family to step it up and change that trajectory for generations to come?
It's kind of a bit of a sticky situation in a sense. I know with with the wealth gap, of course, that is very, very real, and it's continuing to grow. There's a lot of factors as to why that's happening, of course. And there's a lot of, I'd say, looking at the maps and seeing like historically redlined areas, that is one way to kind of like target those markets and the type of people, the demographic that are within there. But I think that when you look at those markets and that specific demographic, there's a good way to be able to provide resources to people within those areas, if that makes sense. Like providing financial resources, going in there and providing financial literacy skills to them, empowering them to know that there is life outside of their little community, and there's a life outside of what it is that they're used to. And one other thing that I have noticed is that the appreciation in these specific areas, especially the ones that are gentrifying in these, distressed communities that are here, like in Houston, is that the people are unaware of even what their homes are worth. And I think that if they tapped into what it is that basically how they are able to take advantage of that then could then create like a whole nother generational wealth thing for them. But it's simply just going out and saying, like, not taking advantage of people. Like there's investors that go around and they say, oh, well, I'll pay you like 50 grand for your house. And to them, it's like, oh, that's a lot of money. Like, that's great. But not without realizing that their house is really worth like 90 or 100 or more. And they're typically paid off because they've been handed down generationally. So there's a way of working in those communities. It just takes someone who actually cares and is willing to I guess, front that education for them without seeking a return.
I think we've actually seen a bunch of this, unfortunately, in Brooklyn, because there are some larger areas that kind of got gentrified and where housing prices exploded as, the population moved in. And I think there were a lot of in real estate investors who are trying to get like deals in quickly with those families because, they don't really understand where the value of the house is moving yet. And that's unfortunate.
Yeah. And then sometimes too, like sometimes it's a matter of also being able to help solve problems, right? That's what we do as real estate investors, is we go out and we help other people and we solve their problems for them. And in certain situations, as the value of these homes are increasing, so are their property taxes. And they might not be able to afford to stay in this home, regardless of how much that home is worth. They can't afford the fixed expenses. So if they're unable to do that, then we can go in and help them avoid bankruptcy or foreclosure or anything that's negatively going to affect their credit, and be able to move them into a position of like being more, I guess you could say, stable and more on their feet.
But I think what you said is so crucial, is the piece that someone needs to upfront that education, kind of reach out. At the same time, we can only speak to people that want to listen. I'm definitely the kind of person who was very ignorant for a larger chunk of my traditional education, and maybe I had to open up my ears later to things. So I guess how do we reach out to people and kind of give them an understanding here? There's something to be learned here, because I feel like we can really only speak to people that are willing to listen. And sometimes and I include myself in there, I wasn't willing to listen, and I had to learn it the hard
Yeah.
way. And
I think that no, you're absolutely right, and that's something that I've kind of learned to understand too. Being in these distressed communities and trying to make a difference is that you can only help someone who wants to be helped. And I think that as we go in and we start to provide resources and we start to uplift communities and rebuild, that there's going to be pushback, because there always is when there's change. And when people come in and they start to see that things look very different than what they've been used to for the last, 50 years, then they're very resistant to that. I think many kind of inevitably understand that change is going to come and that not all change is bad, but we have to be there to understand like their specific needs and what challenges and problems that they have that we can then directly address. It's not enough for me to be like live out in the suburb and go into this city and into their community and say, well, I think you need this, and this. I don't live there, and I can't say for sure like what sorts of daily struggles that they experience. So that's where it comes to for us to be open and understanding on their perspective as well. And that's something that I've done too, is directly talk with residents and figure out like what their common concerns are, what are some issues that they're having, what would they like to see fixed or changed, and then also to give them a peace of mind, because I think that they're just scared. Like honestly, if I'm being, 100% transparent and talking to many of the residents, they're scared of change because they know that when significant change comes, that they think that they're just going to be displaced. And so when we can understand them from a very personal perspective, then I think that's when they will be even more willing and open to listening to what we have to say and try to educating them.
so as a syndicator, how do you communicate that with investors? Because obviously we all need to kind of make sure that our investors are aligned with our values, because I always feel like we can only take money from people who understand where we come from and the ethics we deploy, because it's not all about the bottom line. How do you successfully communicate that with your investor base? Or is it just naturally the people that connect with you tend to think along those lines and values?
Yeah, I would say definitely the people that kind of connect with me just have that sort of that like-minded, that natural spirit about them. And I think too, because it's on my website, you kind of know what you're going to get, right? So when, you go out and you search me up or you look up my content on LinkedIn or just anywhere, like I am who I am. And I think that it's really obvious to kind of see that. The one thing that I will note is that with the multifamily stuff, that's very, that's kind of separate from what it is that I'm doing on the residential side. So how I told you, remember that, that my grandparents all had rentals and whatnot, that for me to create a legacy, I focus on these distressed communities for like my individual projects. So residential, like single family rentals, new development, that is what I'm focusing on and trying to help create very like mission based. As it relates to the multifamily stuff, I'd say that, we have a very specific strategy in looking for value add properties. I wouldn't say that we specifically target areas like that. Like I don't invest in like D-class assets or anything like that. Or D-class
Let's buy the worst asset. No,
I can't say that I tend to roam those areas especially for multifamily. But it is something that, I'm basically like using I'm basically using my experience in multifamily and the money that is made there to then reinvest back into doing good things. And so that's kind of like two pieces to it in a sense.
Nice. I mean, I just like, I'm so thankful that in the multifamily space, there's people like you, there's so many that we met in the multifamily networking. And, they just really want to make a difference with the money they earning, and I appreciate that. I think multifamily real estate is I think I said it in almost every episode because it just rings so true for me. It's like a feel-good business.
It is. It's awesome. And I think too that it's an amazing thing because we know like real estate is very collaborative and it's just, you do everything as a team. That also was a very big mindset thing that I had to shift as well, in understanding like, no, you can't do everything yourself. Like there is a team that, that's involved. And I love that though. But what's even greater is when you're investing in these multifamily asset classes, and just the asset class itself, and you've got, your partners and everyone's like-minded and wants to do like good things. And we could just like vibe really well off of one another to do good for our tenants. And of course our investors as well. But yeah, no, it's a really great industry. And I think that there's a lot of us that if we want to do good, we have a lot of power in our hands to make a true difference.
Yeah, I agree very much so. So as a final note, I would like to ask you, what do you consider a life well lived?
A life well lived? That's a really good question. Yeah. I think that embodies a lot of things, but a life well lived for me would be to have my family be really happy, for all of us to have our health. I would love to be able to do things more as like an extended family. So of course there's like myself, my husband, and our kids, but I think a life well lived would be to like go on several trips and stuff with the whole family, like both sides of grandparents, aunts, uncles, like everyone. And just
that's a big trip.
It's a little. Well, see, I've got a bit of a smaller family on the one side, so I'd say like on average about 8 to 10 of us. But I don't know. I value family and I value genuine connection. And when I can like meet other people that are like that and grow and just do goodness in the world, like that is a life well lived for me. So I'd say that.
Thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom around being an impact investor in the real estate space and kind of your personal mission. Like I'm just thankful, as I said earlier, that there are people like you in the world who, do good and speak good and just go out and as a beacon of light in our community, because ultimately the community is made up of individuals. So thank you for being you in that sense and sharing your time at the Path to Wellth. So sharing your story overall. Yeah, thank you very much for being on the show.
No, thank you. I had a great time. And I think that, just being able to share stories and have the discussion that we did and stuff was wonderful. So I really appreciate you having me.
Thank you. Where can people connect with you?
Yeah, so the best place to get connected with me is LinkedIn. I'm on there like all the time. So you can find me under Nicole Gauthier, and that's spelled Gauthier. Or you can head over to my website at www.wicked-holdings.com. And on there, there's actually a free guide to help people get started passively investing, and kind of breaks down all that, real estate lingo that we kind of throw around, all those fun acronyms and all that fun stuff. So you can learn more about me and connect with me there as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nicole. And I'll talk soon.
Sounds great. See you.
Thank you for joining us at the Path to Wellth. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Check out our upcoming guests and be sure to share it with all your friends and family that want to take their life to the next level of wealth.